Good evening, councillors, officers. Welcome to this first meeting of the Waverley Customer Service O&S Committee. I'll get straight on to the first item of the agenda, which is the appointment of chairman. To confirm the appointment of Councillor Stephen Lorna as chairman of the committee for the 2018-19 council year. Is that agreed?
Agreed.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Item 2, the appointment of the vice chairman, and that is to confirm the appointment of Councillor Mike Band as vice chairman of the committee for the same council year. Is that agreed?
Agreed.
Thank you. The minutes for the last meeting have been with you for quite some time, as they're in the papers. You content they be signed as an accurate record? Agreed? Thank you. I'll do that at the end of the meeting. Amy, do we have any apologies for absence and substitutes?
Thank you, Chairman. Apologies from Councillor Band.
Thank you. Do we have any declarations of interests?
None before the meeting, Chairman.
Now, before, and are there any questions from members of the public?
None received, Chairman.
Or from members?
None received.
Having got through the initial stages, I'd like to now make sure we all know who everyone around the table is. Starting on my left is Yatin Makin, who's the scrutiny officer. We have Katie Meakin, fairly newly appointed HR manager, and a colleague, Emily Watson. Then David Beeman, who is not a member of the committee but is here in his right as a member, and we're joining shortly anyway. Then we have Amy McNulty, who's in charge here. Annie
Brighton,
right.
Corporate Director.
Thank you. Nora Copping, Policy and Performance Officer. Councillor Nabil Nazir, Richard Seaborn, David Round, Nick Holder, and Bob Upton, all members of the committee. Then we have from Atkins, Ian Kelly. We have Kelvin Mills, Graham Clark, David Allen, Robin Taylor and Peter Vickers, all senior officers. We now move on to the first substantive item, the new economic strategy for Waverley Borough Council. Kelvin, we're going to say a few words on that, and I know that Leanne will be available for questions.
Thank you, Chairman. I'd like to introduce Leanne Kelly, an economist from Atkins who helped work on the strategy and bring it forward. She'll be talking through the process on how the strategy was brought together once I finish my introduction. The strategy currently out for consultation is developed from the 2015-20 strategy, where it states it will be due to be updated every 1 to 2 years. It also looks to respond to the Creators Review, where it was stated the strategy needs to be more measurable and promote future economic prosperity. Following the Creators Review, we met with key stakeholders and called Chambers of Commerce, Enterprise First, UCA and the M3 LEP, and we've already received feedback from the current draft from councillors and parishes as well as chambers, which we will seek to include as we move through this consultation process. The new strategy sets out to create a new vision for the council, a great place for local businesses to grow and flourish, where communities have access to local employment and where everyone shares in this economic prosperity. So what I'd like to do now is pass over to Leanne to talk you through how the strategy was brought together.
Great, thanks, Kelvin. So as mentioned, this was setting a strategic vision for Waverley, seeing it as a document that will be evolved and updated every couple of years, and a document that sets out the framework for dialogue and exchange of ideas, as well as key partnerships that are very much central to economic strategy. I would say there's 3 key parts of our process to developing this strategy. Firstly, it was local socio-economic data analysis and using comparisons with some suitable areas in the wider region. So that took data from O&S, purchase data from Experian for local businesses. Some sort of key points there sort of stuck up. So the high level of self-employment in Waverley, number of home businesses sort of coming in near 10,000. So it's at 10,000 home workers, number of registered businesses was over 8,000. Looked across their turnover data as well. The second part was a bit more of the judgment aspect, looking at strengths, weaknesses, opportunities and threats in Waverley. So bringing out some of that quality of place aspects, the small businesses, the independent nature of some of the high streets, looking at the Chamber of Commerce as well. The arts, events and venue landscape of Waverley. some of the strengths, look at some of the areas where there's some perhaps potential weaknesses or future threats, looking at transport infrastructure pressures, sustainability of local environment, look at crowding from the transport pressures, and the interaction between employment space and housing development. So some of those key opportunities looked at was around sustainability of town centres, looking at the activities and range for the town centres, picking up about the visitor economy, which turned into one of our key themes, as an area for opportunity for Waverley in that sustainable economic development, and the related infrastructure to support that. And the third aspect of that, which underpinned sort of 6 themes that emerged through the economic strategy, was, as Kelvin mentioned, the consultations with the key partners. And it's built off of the 2015 and 20 strategy to then go back to consult with some of those key partners. As mentioned, UCA, the Chambers, Waverley Train Services, and the LEP. So through those 3 aspects of the developments, we came forward with the 6 strategic economic themes of the framework, which I hope you've all seen. And what we want to do is, under each of those, set out an action plan for the next 5 years, which will be updated on a rolling 2-year period. We want to set out key responsibility leads, key activities, and those measures that Waverley can monitor and manage over time to see are we achieving those targets within each of those economic themes.
I suppose the only other comment worth making, this work began back in March 2017, and there's been somewhat of a delay with the adoption of the local plan before it could come forward. So we need there perhaps needs to be some more research feedback from the local plan once adopted and feedback into the strategy.
Yeah, I think we picked up some of the consultation responses so far, so there's some good points which I think reflect that timetabling. Yeah, so hopefully that strategy sets us a nice action plan for going forward, and there's measures there to manage and monitor that progress.
Okay, thank you. Questions, members?
You mentioned that there are 10,000 private businesses with people working from home. Well, I was wondering, are they being properly assessed for council tax? And also the second thing is, which I was involved in, is superfast broadband. Obviously they need access to superfast. How much of the area of Waverley is now accessible to superfast broadband?
That was one of the activities we've worked within the second theme, the business and employment support with the superfast broadband. That's a good question. I think it would be a case of going back, because I'm sure since we first looked at this, the percentage might have moved a little bit. So we can have a look at and see what areas covered at the moment.
And we're certainly aware that Surrey are working on key hotspots where there's been issues and looking to address issues with low connectivity with broadband. So that'll be something we can feedback in council.
Chairman,
do you want me to pick up the point on council tax?
Please do.
Our colleagues here probably wouldn't have been looking for that in the research. So a couple of years ago we were aware of a lot more businesses starting up in homes around the area, and we actually undertook an exercise with Experian as well, with a view to making sure that everybody was paying the right amount of business rates. We did find a few that weren't, but on the whole we didn't find anything significant, but it's something we're going to repeat because we're aware of the growth over the last couple of years. And what would happen is, if somebody's running a business out of their home, that's fine, but if they've got a material part of their home that's solely for that purpose, then we would have to instruct the valuation office to come and have a look at that, because they assess that rather than us, and then they would make a view about whether that should be assessed for business rates. So you can sit on your sofa in your lounge with your laptop and run a business, that's fine. But if you've turned a front room into an office and you've got filing and everything else, that you probably need to pay business rates for that. And then that might bring your council tax banding down. So we don't make those decisions, the valuation office do. And One of the reasons we did this exercise was to identify any businesses that were sort of advertising through the website, the Yellow Pages, and Experian brought all that together and then matched that with our business rate database. So we are going to do it again, because I'm sure there are businesses that have cropped up, keep their overheads down, but they still need to pay business rates if they've got business premises that are dedicated to the business rather than domestic.
Thank you very much. Richard. Thank you, Chairman. Clearly a lot of work's gone into this strategy, and there's some good ideas in it for which the officers certainly need to be congratulated. However, a good strategy should demonstrate a full understanding of where we are now and identify key factors that are going to affect the future. And I have to say, this strategy, or the draft, has some significant gaps, both in the data that are provided and in the subsequent analysis, which indicates to me that it's not actually quite ready to go to Executive and Council. I've got a good number of concerns which I've fed back through the consultation process, both on the substance of the report and the style in which it's presented. But can I just list a few of those concerns to give an example of the kind of things that are worrying me? To start with, it doesn't actually, the report doesn't actually have a proper introduction. It has Councillor Edwards' foreword, but it launches straight into numbers without actually saying what the strategy seeks to achieve and what the council can actually do in terms of influencing economic strategy. So if we don't really know where we're going, we're not off to a good start in analysing the rest of the document. It doesn't identify the turnover breakdown by business sector, so we don't really know where the value lies in Waverley's economy. Bits and pieces of the economy are analysed, but there's not a systematic breakdown of the, I'm told it's what, 4 billion value, 4 billion that is the value of the economy. The number in the report is wrong by a factor of about 500. So that's clearly quite worrying. It's around about page 48, I think. That has been subsequently checked, and I've had feedback on the 2017 number is about 4 billion, I think. So we're not even clear what the value of the economy is, and we certainly don't know what the main sectors are within that economy, and those, which of those sectors can we actually interact with, should we be interacting with, and where the value lies. I think that was a big issue. We look at the we look at the staffing levels, the number of employees that's presented, but number of employees doesn't necessarily equate to value. You have large employment with not much value associated with it, and small employers with very large value associated. So that's not presented. If that data were presented, then I would assert that it's going to present a picture, and I'm making assertions that I don't actually have the facts in front of me. I would assert that it's going to tell the story which is missed out completely in the document, that the economy of Waverley is a service economy based on a very large market of high-earning people that work outside the borough. So people come and settle in Waverley because it's a great place to live, and that's all stated. But the conclusion isn't drawn from the fact that it's a great place to live, that actually a huge amount of the income generated in the borough is by people living here because it's a great place to live. We have a vastly increased number of private school places in the borough compared with the national average. There are 7,300 independent school places in the borough, so that's providing a huge number of jobs which comes out. It's also providing well over, probably somewhere between £100 and £200 million worth of annual income. It's just not touched on. The care sector's not touched on. That's part of the service economy. I believe our biggest employers and probably the biggest value is probably retail, Sainsbury's, Waitrose, sorry, I shouldn't be advertising, but you know what I mean. But it's not stated, we don't know. And so, have we consulted with these people that are generating the high value in the borough to find out what they need from us, and we could talk to them to ask what we need from them. So there are opportunities and threats there. The document has a bias towards the town economies, and particularly Farnham. If you do a word search in it, Farnham is mentioned more often than Cranley, Godalming and Hazelmere combined. And the rural economy almost drops off the scale, and it's not represented by the Chambers of Commerce. I live in I represent a rural ward. I reckon the value of our economy in Bramley, Busbridge and Hascombe is probably the order of 30 to 40 million pounds a year, and it just doesn't feature. And we've consulted with the Chamber of Commerce, but that rural economy hasn't been touched by the consultation. I've been to the 3 largest employers in my ward, and they haven't heard anything of it, and we haven't given them enough time to respond because the embargo on the document only happened on the 15th. The largest employer, St Catherine's School, just said we haven't got time to do this, we're too busy with exams. The second largest is a care provider who looked at it and said the analysis is not very good and the care sector is just not mentioned. So there are issues there. There's a section in it about the birth and death of businesses, and it's great to see, and it focuses very much on the fact that we're actually good at creating businesses in Waverley. What it completely misses is the fact that when you compare growth, new businesses with businesses that have not continued over the same period, the growth in Waverley is actually the lowest of any of the boroughs in Surrey. But if you subtract one from the other and then compare it with the number of new businesses, you come up with a total growth of 7% over the 5-year period. That compares with the largest, which is about 35%. So the strategy, I think, should at least have a target of understanding why businesses are not surviving. It might be the nature of business in Waverley. Short-term businesses might be a good thing, but we don't understand. It's not presented here why that circumstance happens, and I think it's pretty important because encouraging businesses to set up here when we actually have that apparent threat to their survival is not a good thing. I think we need to understand why they're shutting down at such a high rate before we invite people to come and set up. So that was an issue. And finally, and these are only some of the examples, I've got others, but amongst the threats, can't help noticing that Surrey County Council's finances are severely stressed at the moment with nothing on the horizon to suggest that they're going to turn around in the short term. And yet we're advocating a visitor economy, which I totally support. But our footpaths are becoming almost inaccessible in places because Surrey is not spending anything on them. So, again, as an opportunity there, we should be talking with Surrey and identifying ways as to how we can make our visitor economy work by giving the visitors something to enjoy rather than inviting them to the borough to find that they can't actually walk down the paths that they want to go down. It's a major issue. So I think the draft strategy is a good base on which to build. But equally, I don't believe we're yet in a position that this should go forward. And I would suggest, Chairman, that we might consider recommending that this be put in the hands of an overview and scrutiny task group to work very quickly, because it's very clear that this does need to come out quickly. But I think there's the potential for the experience that exists amongst the members to identify some of these issues. And this is not just me that's identified these. Actually, the councillors in the Eastern districts have looked at it together on a formal basis, and a lot of these themes and sentiments were echoed. So I think there is an opportunity both to focus this so that we can get a lot more value and focus on the things that can be done, and very much make it a living document, but one where we actually understand from a proper introduction and analysis where we go. Thank you. Sorry, it's a bit long.
Before I go to count around, I've had a question of my own. Am I right to think that when in your list of partners that you consulted, no employers were included?
Yeah, that's this version of the report.
It does seem to me
update.
to be a bit of a gap, because if we're talking about what Waverley can do for businesses, it would seem to me a fairly essential step to ask businesses what they think we can do for them. And I think to put forward a strategy without that question being answered is
a bit remiss, to be honest. And the other issue, which I think Councillor Seaborn rightly brought out, I think Waverley has to both be realistic about what it can do for businesses, and it needs to say so up front. We don't want to set up either unreasonable expectations or ones which can invite a rather cynical response from people who feel they do understand the area, and just wonder if we're not trying to, if you like, big ourselves up, to use the modern idiom, just suggest we can do more than we actually realistically can. And I am quite concerned about that aspect too, and I think before this becomes a formally published document, I would like to see an introduction which shows a very level-headed understanding of what our role is. Councillor Brown?
Thank you.
No.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. How do I follow both those? And where does one start? First of all, I want to say it's a brilliant document that reads well. It's easy to read, it's got nice pictures, and it's great. But I make this comment, which I do about most paperwork produced here. I wish people could summarise. And you have to ask yourself, if the lazy bastard is going to read this, he's only going to read one page, can I get it on that? Because in the city we have to do that. They are vitally important people, unlike councils, of course. It's not that difficult. You can put the key message on the first page, then you expand it a bit, then the rest you put into appendices. I also think, as Richard was saying, that, I mean, Haslemere is a preeminent commuter town. Probably you don't realise in other parts of the borough the extent to which it's used as a place to get on the train. We like to think that some of these guys bring some economic benefit to town. They might actually remember there's a Waitrose and come back and shop there. But if he lives in Cheshire, it's probably unlikely, and many of them do. And if you were doing a summary of the economy throughout Waverley, I agree, it ought to include the lot. And maybe you'd have a very good pie chart that says, look guys, so many billion a year is the economy of this area, 80% of it's out of area, or whatever the figure is. And then it's not unfair for this report to dwell on the local business. I agree with that. I'm not saying you should analyse what we will do in the city, we get tired. But I presume it has to focus upon the local businesses, which often means retailers. And they, like farmers, always moan. And their moans are car parking, that's subject again, I always seem to touch on it, and business rates. And given the present financial situation, neither of those subjects are ones where we can move the levers. That's good government. We move the levers a bit and then see market forces take effect. I presume the Chancellor of the Exchequer would be able to do that in more happier times. We probably can't. I assume we can't change business rates.
Correct.
I assume we can't do much about car parks. Well, we just need the money, don't we?
Well, we do, but it is something controlled by the
Yeah.
council, not by anybody else.
I'm pleased to see here actually that there is a paragraph that says, I forget where it is, a strategy for local car parking charges, as if we could influence it ourselves for each town, which I think would be very helpful, and which we would like to try. As I say, there's so many different themes to touch on. It's difficult to know what to concentrate on. And I don't want to sound, and I'm sure Councillor Seaborn doesn't want to sound like very critical because you missed this and you missed that and so forth. What is great, a different slant would be useful. I have another discrete point to make. I think there's a reference regarding Beacon Hill, which is a bit of Haslemere we try not to forget about. Regarding, is it clause 4? It's a loaded phrase. Do I mean clause 4 or something else for? Direction 4.
Yeah, Article 4.
The death of local businesses by permitted development. It's happening in Beacon Hill. Thank you for agreeing to put in the pilot scheme there, but I think it's taking a long time to get started, and we would stress urgency in getting it moving because we can see it happening again. There's not many businesses, but it helps to kill off the area. And the other comment I'd make, and I'll have to stop a minute, otherwise I never will. I came this morning from a neighbourhood planning meeting. In Haslemere, they grind on a long time. And one is reminded that the crux of a neighbourhood plan appears to be housing. It's the way central government gets us all to stop being NIMBYs. You've got to have so many houses, but you can decide where they go. There's not much in these neighbourhood plans on business sites. Factories. We used to have some in Haysmere, largely gone.
Sorry, the purpose of that comment when you were suggesting that the economic strategy should contain a recommendation that such things should, or should be amended to include them if they don't.
No, I'm just highlighting issues without
Well, no, I think
solutions.
one thing, I think we must be fairly focused. We've got a
But I think
long
for an economic strategy, we ought to have a strategy as to how we make more sites available for factories. Otherwise, we wouldn't have lost McLarens here and there working, and we wouldn't be losing barons who are going to Hampshire because Waverley didn't help them find a site. Allegedly.
Thank you.
Certain ladies focus.
Leanne, do you want to make any comments in reply?
Sure, thank you for your comments. And I have received more that I'll be able to go through in detail. So I think firstly to say, very happy to take those away. I'll look into those in more detail with my team, and very happy to reach out and contact if there's any areas. Just make sure we're aligned in our thinking. Thank you for those. I think there's just a couple of those comments which I'll respond to now. So firstly from Councillor Seaborn, we absolutely agree about the breakdown of turnover by sector, and glad to let you know that we have now gone and purchased that data from ONS, so we'll be able to add that in, showing that breakdown by sector, so that will be useful, and developing a narrative around that as per some of those comments that you made. I'd also like to raise the point about independent schools. There's also been one of the top employers. That was an oversight from our side, so appreciate that, and that can be drawn out to the strategy going forward. Likewise, the care sector, that's another area which I think needs more narrative around that, and more understanding about the opportunities that exist there for Waverley.
The introduction.
Yes.
Introduction, yeah, agree. And I think that one page, key points, key messages, that gives that snapshot, absolutely. So that's something we'll work on for that final version. There was also a point made regarding talking to the employers, and so I agree. So I think that was filtered through our conversations with the chambers, and there was a survey that went out to each of the Chamber of Commerce individually. And I think that point was made earlier that we built on stakeholder engagement that was undertaken for the previous strategy for 2015-20, but appreciate that of course there's a bit of a gap to have that direct engagement with employers, and it's the nature of the timetable for this perhaps. And lastly, also like to respond, I think again we picked up that point about the summary of the page, of the one-page summary. Some of those other points around development, I think again we can just draw those out a bit neater. So, thank you for those.
And I think we truly value the comments that have come back through the consultation. I think obviously we'll come to a recommendation, but it will be certainly something we will take back to portfolio holder and discuss and talk about timescales going forward.
Judging what I've heard, I think my colleagues would probably prefer that is done, and this committee, or a subgroup of it which we can organise later, should see a copy as well, to make sure its concerns have been taken on board effectively. And so I think the recommendation should be really amended to indicate that this committee wishes some further work to be done on the strategy, and would like an opportunity to see the refreshed document. At the same time, we don't have any preference as the portfolio holder with a view, and these things will always be authorised to go to the executive in between meetings. We can give our consent to that. Is that the sense of colleagues?
Could I endorse that, Chairman, and ask that maybe some of these figures can be brought up to date? We've got some at 2016, some at 2014. I mean, it seems to be inconsistent.
It may be what is actually available. I imagine you're going for the latest data that you can find.
Yeah, it would have been the latest data. As we said, this was started in March 2017. So at that point, obviously 2016 for ONS would have been the last update as far. Some data sets, but yeah, I appreciate we can have a run through and just make sure there's no other areas that we can update.
That's right there. Have you got the sense of that?
Yeah.
So is that approach agreed?
Agreed.
Thank you very much indeed. Right, we move on to the next item. And Leanne, thank you very much for coming tonight.
No, thank you, pleasure, and thanks for your comments.
Item 9, the Service Plan's Annual Outturn Report, pages 89 to 98. Nora, you're going to present on this.
Thank you, Chairman. As the members are aware, the Council monitors the performance of its service on the corporate level in a series of various measures, and one of those measures is looking into the service plans monitoring. This committee scrutinizes the performance of 3 service areas: the corporate and customer services, finance and policy and governance. It is worth mentioning that as of 1st of April this year, the election and human resources team were also shifted around and moved now to the policy and governance service team. The annual analysis of the service objectives for the financial year show 94.4% completion rate for this committee, for the services under the remit of this committee, which is a very good overall performance. As Chairman mentioned, the details can be found on the page 93 to 98 of this agenda. For the corporate and customer services area, only 1 out of 9 service plans objectives was not fully achieved in the last year. This was the delivery of the new planning IT system, and the delay was due to issues arising during the procurement process, and a new contractor was now appointed in December, and the work is being done going to new financial year 2018 and 19 to complete this objective going forward. All 8 out of finance service plan objectives, all of them really were achieved at the end of the financial year. It is really worth mentioning that the benefit service underwent a pilot systems thinking project, which was very successful and resulted in a significant reduction in benefits payments processing time. And similar pilot project will be implemented in the revenue stream next year, or has actually started in May, and will be rolling into the year 2018 and 19. So further improvements in this service area are expected. 14 out of 17 policy and governance service plan objectives were fully achieved last year. The 3 partially completed actions which will be carried forward in the new financial year concern the corporate strategy, which at the start of the year was envisaged that the existing corporate plan would be refreshed. However, the Council's new Chief Executive has led a more fundamental review of the corporate strategy in consultation with the members. And this has meant that the original timescales were not met. The final draft of the new corporate strategy will be coming to the executive on July, and then onwards the full council as well. The second action, which wasn't fully achieved, concerns work relating to addressing staffing gaps in the organization. Progress has been made, but this action was not completed within the year. The Council's new HR manager will be leading work to develop a new HR strategy for the organization, and this will pick up this and other key HR issues. Finally, the last partially completed objective for the policy and governance relates to a small shortfall in the number of online forms going live. The project is largely completed with 90 forms now online, and there are only 5 of them still remaining in progress. That is all from me. Any questions?
I'll just get out of the way something I raised at the Chairman's briefing earlier today. I think on page 90 of the agenda, there's a reference to one of the projects which has not been completed. And I must tell colleagues that I asked for the field title annual status to be changed to completion status. I didn't understand what annual status meant. And I've also questioned whether we should really be looking at not how much time has passed since the project was begun, it seems irrespective of what's been achieved, but purely in terms of how far are we along the line to getting what we want out of it. And my understanding is that the reasons which are no one's fault, indeed it's a good thing that the due diligence picked up the fact that the original contractor was probably not a reliable partner, but this has delayed things. The new contractor, as it has recently in the last, I think, month, presented their proposal and feedback is awaited. But whereas the building control system might be achieved in the next 2 or 3 months, planning, which is the larger part, I would guess, won't be available until January. So by my book, even on a time basis, the most we should be claiming is about 15%. And obviously take officers' advice as to how much of the substance of the project we can say has actually happened. I believe that not much has actually been done yet, but that may be wrong.
Sorry, Joe, is that item, is that the first one?
CCS 3.3, System Political Planning System Project. And the other one, which Robin Taylor was very candid about, SH 1.2, one of the things which Waverley is to be commended for is trying to install smart objectives wherever possible. And Robin commented that particular one is very difficult to be smart about. And I think therefore any sort of achievement percentage or completion of this percentage should be treated with a certain amount of care. Robin, is that fair? Yeah. And I think it's a difficult area, and I think it's something which we need to look at carefully to make sure that these completion numbers tell a really firm story. And as I say, seeing what's happened with the planning system project, it's clearly important. I hope it will happen before the end of this council year, but I think we're a long way from getting it finished as we stand now. Anyway, colleagues, any questions? David?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The one thing I do know about is computer systems. It was my life for 40 years, and I'm quite new at it. And I can recommend to you a lovely Radio 4 programme called More or Less, where the economics of some guy takes apart government departments from his quoted statistics and just getting them wrong. It's like the difference between percentage basis points that have gone up, or the percentage that the percentage has gone up, if I'm making sense. Which means I don't like the way the numbers are done. Too much of this is 100%, it's very glib. And you can't compare them. I guess this 94.4% has been done by adding up all the hundreds and then these few that were only 50 or 65. You can't add up figures like that. It's apples and pears, they're different. And I don't know how you can, but I just find it trying hard but not convincing. Better to say, all done, ticked, on 100%, because you probably couldn't do 80% of it.
Could I suggest, I think it's a very reasonable concern. If we're going to use these numbers, we should be confident we know what they mean.
Yeah.
But I think we should take this offline. It's a lengthy topic in its own right. And if we have a task group available with officers on this point, then I think we should do it. Robin.
Just to make the point that the Chief Executive has been leading a project to review how we do performance management and performance monitoring. So actually, you will see different templates coming forward with a different way of measuring it. So just to reflect on what Tom said at the recent group of scrutiny chairs, I know he would welcome your views on that as we get that started, and that may be the place to...
Okay, no, thank you.
It's really just a case of presentation, and as you said yourself, Chairman, you didn't like the heading annual status. It's where numbers really aren't, unless it's something concrete you can measure, like the number of widgets you processed or the amount of millions you collected in housing rent. It's very difficult to put a number to agreeing a project plan, just taking the first one, for example.
Well, let's not spend too much time
Sure,
on this. I think
principle.
in IT, if you had a project that's going to consist of, say, 150 different modules, you could measure how many modules have actually been injected. Exactly.
And on detail, the planning system portal that the public uses, and that we councils elsewhere use, it has problems.
Yeah,
That's the one that's allegedly 65% done?
No, that is different. I did ask that question earlier. This is the system which will be providing the data for them.
Right, okay, sorry.
Right, the recommendation is that we... I'm sorry.
Just a quick question. I mean, apart from completely endorsing your initial comments about CCS 3.3, that's the one thing I picked up on in terms of the problem. In terms of an opportunity, on BG 3.1 on page 96 of our papers, I don't recall members being shown these new corporate brand standards. I may be wrong, but... if I missed it, then I apologise, but I don't recall seeing them, and I think it might be rather useful for members to see these so that we are all aligned with the way Waverley should look. So I think that might be an opportunity.
Very happy to circulate them by email if that
Yes,
was.
please do.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions from the colleagues? No? I think we have considered the progress against actions as the recommendation asks, and we've made our observations. We want the performance numbers to be meaningful and the basis on which they're presented made clear to us. Is that agreed?
Agreed.
Thank you very much. We move on still with Nora, the performance management report, item 10 for quarter 4 2017-18. That is the last financial year, and this will be done on the exceptions basis. So Nora, over to you.
Thank you very much, Chairman. So as you mentioned, the committee asked for the performance and scrutiny of the performance to be presented on exceptional basis only, so I will only concentrate on areas where performance is exceptionally good or where the improvements are required. The annex to this report is on page 103 to 107 of the agenda. The finance team has performed consistently well throughout the year with regards to the council tax and business rates collection and improved processing time for new claims and events changes. However, payment of invoices to local businesses, the indicator F4, has fallen behind in the last 2 quarters. This is due to the implementation of the new purchase order system initially affecting the performance, but the improvements were already observed in the first quarter of the new financial year. The indicators for the policy and governance team cover 2 areas, human resources and the corporate complaints. There will be a separate report on annual workforce profile presented as the next item of this agenda, so I won't go into the details, but it is worth mentioning that the KPI relating to the sickness absence remain within the target throughout the year until the 4th quarter, which has been impacted by the seasonal sickness in the teams. The staff turnover has unfortunately risen in the 4th quarter, and there were 34 members of staff leaving and 18 new starters joining, and this increase was partially due to redundancies as well. The members can find the annual complaints analysis per service team on page 101. The number of complaints has decreased through the year overall, although the number of complaints received by the housing operations property team has significantly increased due to poor customer service from the contractor. The improvement actions were taken and the issues are being currently addressed. So the improvements should be seen in the next quarter. The number of complaints relating to environmental services has improved quite significantly throughout the year, with 69 complaints at the beginning of the year and only 18 at the end of the year. However, the earlier figure at the beginning of the year was quite significantly impacted by the disability car parking issues that we had at the beginning of the financial year. And although we don't really have the corporate and we don't have any indicators measuring the corporate and customer service team at the moment, the customer service review that is being conducted, it is hoped that the new measures will be put forward for monitoring of that specific team in the future, and the findings will be brought back to the community.
Thank you. Can you give any more detail as to exactly what the housing property contractor was doing and the environmental services issue? So these are quite significant problems which have been clearly addressed, but I think it's quite good to know what it was, what was the nature of the problem.
With the contractor
yes.
Specifically?
What were they not doing?
I have not been given those.
I think that's back to.
Could I make a general comment? Whenever any item of data comes to us which demonstrates an exceptional performance, good or bad, but mainly bad, I think it's important the scrutiny committee understands what had happened. It really and I'd be grateful if you could inform us by sort of email what these things were. It's not just curiosity, it's just something to give us a better picture as to what's actually happening in the council. It's something for us to keep an eye on later. And that applies to any report to this committee. If it's something which is clearly anomalous, then please could the relevant head of service be asked for a short report showing what was gone wrong and what has been done about it. And so if you are able to report that in the most recent quarter, the current quarter, things are much better, that is good news, but we'd like to know what you did to make it better. Councillor Round.
Indeed, it's useful to think, what would the supplementary question be on this point?
Yes.
They will focus on the one that sticks out.
Nora, does that make
Yes,
sense?
thank you
Councillor
very
Brown put it very well. Always think of the supplementary question. Richard.
Thank you. So on strategic HR item 6, the graph at the bottom, I hate to nitpick on detail here. We're actually going to talk about the HR statistics later, so that's fine. But surely the numbers for each quarter, leavers minus joining or joining minus leavers, come to a number which should be added to the total staff to arrive at the following quarter's number of staff, and these numbers don't add up. And since this is going forward, it shouldn't appear as it's operative as it stands. It needs to be corrected, because no matter which way I jiggle it, I either completely don't understand what's being presented, or there's a numerical error.
Quarters as individual sample points, whereas the annual thing is what most of us would. So I think there needs to be an annual total as well, or just show different shading what the cumulative totals are as well.
Well, no, I mean, I'm saying that on page 100, this graph at the bottom of
I was looking at 106.
Yeah.
100.
Right, 100, yeah, the graph at the bottom, you've got a grey bar with a number, a brown bar and a blue bar. The blue bar and the brown bar together should come to a net increase or decrease in staff, which added to the grey bar should lead to the number for the next quarter, and they don't. I can't see any way of doing it.
Okay, so that's a different point. Well spotted.
So this is just, please could we have it put right before it goes to the executive, so that
Yes.
a sharp-eyed member of the public doesn't spot it.
Nora, does that make sense?
Yes.
Yes. Good. Yes, I think getting data right, you have a committee here which will look at these things in detail.
And also, it'd be nice to know, is total staff here the total staff on the books, or the total staff number that we would like to have on the books? In other words, staff employed plus vacancies. It'd be actually interesting to see both of those.
It's total staff.
It's total staff.
Is that FTEs?
Yeah.
That's the other thing too, of course. Because we have about 480 souls.
Yes,
in total.
417.
470.
Thank you.
Any other comments to me? No. The recommendation is that we consider the performance figures and make any observations which we have done. Is that agreed? Thank you very much. Move on to item 11, which I think represents something of a new phase. We've been talking about getting a better picture of how the staff numbers actually work, and I'm very grateful to the HR team and to in particular for getting this done, and I would now have to hand over to you to give us an introduction to it.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, so thank you for having us. Myself and Emily are new and have recently been looking at the data that has previously been collated as to what we could newly provide you and how do we get that data as well. So it's been quite a journey analysing everything. I'm very aware at this point what we have given you has extended to what we've got before. We would be able to condense it in the future, and I take on the points about having a summary page and a one-page overview as well. But at this point, we were quite keen to get your views at the end as to what you think about what we are providing you with. I want to highlight some key points first of all, and some of those relate to the previous meeting you had where you talked about looking at turnover within pay grades and also looking at whether we are possibly losing skill and knowledge within the business. So specifically looking at the turnover and retention that we have. The first summary page, if you go to 1112, So firstly, within turnover, we are going to start analysing all our figures and comparing to other local boroughs and seeing where we compare within those. This is a snapshot, first of all. We do still have some work to do within this area. We haven't completely clarified as to how those councils are collating that data. We want to make sure we're collating it in the same way. So as you can see at the moment, as Nora highlighted, yes, our turnover has increased, and also on this page it shows that we have the highest turnover of some of our other boroughs, but actually once we've had time to review those areas as to how we're collecting that data, that might change a little bit. And actually going back to the point of when you were talking about the figures with Nora and that turnover side, our figures for turnover, we're going to review ourselves as to how we are producing that, because there's a number of ways of getting turnover: quarterly, annually. Do you add figures together? Do you look at one whole figure? So we're going to compare those over the past few quarters and years and make sure that we have one clear response on that side as well. Staying on that page, we have had a previous figure for sickness of 1.2%, and that's actually referred to the average number of days off in a year rather than overall absence. So we will now be reporting on overall absence, which has gone down from 2.63% to 2.58%. Our sickness ratio in relation to other councils and overall, looking at national statistics in the CIPD, is on an average. So we're not too high, we're not too low, we're doing relatively well. But a lot of the problems are around mental health issues, which have started to increase within this area, and that is something that we're looking at in conjunction with the Wellbeing Charter that we've been equipped with, and something we need to look at more closely with our heads of service as well. And then the final area I wanted to show, which was with regards to comparing pay grades. If you look on page 114 to 116, so on page 116, this shows our total staff and total leavers by grade. And our highest turnover by grade is grade 10 to 12, with an average percentage leaving about 35% within each of those grades. Keeping that in mind, if you then look to page 133, sorry, can I make a new flip? The highest proportion of people are leaving at pay band A. So we have our pay bands where they can start at level E and then they work their way up to pay band A, being at the highest grade, and then they can move on to another grade. What we've noticed by segregating all of these is that everyone is actually leaving at the top of the grade. And if you look at pay grade B, this is possibly where people aren't leaving. It maybe shows that people are waiting to get to the top of that salary benchmark and then moving on because there's possibly nothing else to move on to. But that's something where we need to do a bit more research as well. If you then look at page 135, it actually demonstrates that the highest proportion of people are leaving in their first year. And then page 136 shows that those that do leave in their first year are actually, of course, the whole of our age range that we have within our workforce. So it's really interesting to see that most of our workforce do leave in the first year, but a lot of them are leaving when they've reached the salary band they want to get to, and that there isn't a particular relevance to what age they're leaving or when they're coming in as to then how long they stay with us. When we refer this to whether we are losing any skills and knowledge within the business, this is something we need to do more research on. So we need to look at specific skills that we're actually talking about and specific knowledge that we need to talk about as well. But the figures suggest that we could be losing skills of new people that we've brought in who have specific qualifications that we need, and they've done a lot of hard work for us and then they move on within a year. Also, if we are losing people who have a lot of years service behind them in other businesses and they've brought that in as well. What we don't seem to be losing is people that have been with us for a very long time and have a lot of knowledge internally. We're not losing that area. It's the people that are coming in new to us. So those are areas that we need to look on a little bit further. So I just wanted to highlight those key points, as those were areas that have been requested before. but otherwise each of the reports are showing the staff turnover within each of our departments, and we've started to analyse where we are 5% or above on our turnover and which areas we have concerns about. And in each of the reports we've highlighted where we think those have those concerns and what we're doing about them. So that's the main overview I wanted to give at the moment. I'd be keen to have any questions or areas people would want to look at further.
Well, may I start off by saying thank you both very much indeed. It's very interesting information. I'm sure that ideas will come not only at this meeting but afterwards too.
Yes, I think so.
I mean, I won't say much. The one thing which, obviously, looking at the total resignation turnover, and thank you for getting that statistic out, it's very high in environmental services because of the cleaner issue. And it might be an idea, a very fair thing to do, to remove cleaners from the analysis and show both the gross figure and, if you take out cleaners, what the net figure is. There's a fairer view of what's happening. Anyway, colleagues. Nick, sorry, then Nick first.
I think, looking at page 137, the amount of leavers who leave within the first year seems to be, as you have pointed out, considerably higher than anywhere else. I'm just wondering what the reason is for these people leaving. Is it because they didn't understand the amount of work they were expected to do? They weren't happy with the ambience and or the management structure, or what was the reason why so many left within the first year?
We don't have one specific reason at the moment. It is an amalgamation of a whole range of reasons. So it is to do with pay, their development, training. Some of those are within fixed-term contracts or temporary contracts. But what we have started to do, which I think was shown previously, is we have a new exit interview process, and we're going to start analysing all of those online rather than in a paper format, and then we can break that down even further. But at the moment we don't have one specific area that we're going to focus on.
Nabil.
On page 112, the report is beautiful, but do we have any other councils which are higher than us on the total turnover? And could we have a comparison? I don't know if other councils agree, but what are the reasons in other councils which are around us that they are moving over there, and what is the comparison with us? If you could have that as well.
Yes, so the information we have, we've asked all of the councils. The information we have is obviously only those that have responded, but what we're working on together is the Surrey partnership and making sure we get data from all of the councils. So we are aiming by the next quarter we'll have a
beautiful report, I must say, with the government covering all these things. Thank you.
Thank you. Richard?
I'll just echo everything that's been said about the quality of this. This is just excellent. It's really, really digs deep, and also, you know, there's a clear recognition that it's early days. You've done a huge amount in a very short amount of time between you, and great opportunity to build on this. Really pleased to see that the exit analysis is starting. That should be quite insightful. It also enables us to worry about the issues that have come up previously about large numbers of people leaving, and it's been pointed out very correctly that actually some of that is deliberate and targeted. Now we know who's leaving out of choice and who's their choice and who's leaving out of our choice, and that's really useful. The recommendation is for us to identify any further information we wish to receive. I think we're inundated with information. The only comment I'd make about future reports, and I understand it's not right to happen because you're so early into it, but just some conclusions and recommendations. Because this is reports not really for our benefit, it's actually the organisation's benefit to try and address the very high turnover that we do have. And likewise, the one health issue is the mental health issue. You flag that, and it's clearly on the agenda, so it would be good to see subsequently whether there are hotspots in the organisation that where team leaders need to just worry about whether they are a cause. Hopefully not, but yeah. Thank you very much. Excellent.
Anyone else? Yeah.
Echoes. Well done. The other thing I specialised in for a few years was personnel systems, funny enough. And I'm only glad I didn't have to produce all this stuff. That's good. Can I ask, are these all the councils you've got figures from on page 1, or it's just the 4 of us?
It was a very short space of time that we gave them to respond, and obviously a lot of the other councils don't have the time immediately to respond to our queries and aren't necessarily happy to share
It's
those
just
figures.
interesting how close the others are to each other, isn't it?
And I do think, Councillor, that is partly possibly a good idea to look at how they're calculating the turnover. Having had a quick conversation with one of my counterparts in another council earlier today about how they calculate their turnover figures. They are taking things like taking a different way of looking at average number of total employees. And so they are using slightly different calculations. I don't think that if we were to change our method of calculation, we'd suddenly be the lowest turnover. We'd probably still be the highest in comparison to these, but I think we would be a lot more in line with their figures if we were to...
What might perhaps be also useful, and I really don't want to create work unnecessarily, teams a bit. I mean, an indication of the relative size of the other councils. I mean, I don't know, they're all the same. I doubt it. Things never are all the same in this world.
No.
Just quote either the annual budget or the number of staff they have, just so we get a... Oh, that's a tin pot place with me more than, isn't it?
That's what I asked.
Most district councils overall, they certainly have the same population, more or less.
Well, I would expect so.
And the very last, very quick question. I don't want to prolong this because I echo the comments. It's very good indeed, and look forward to further development. Do you find that other councils are, on the whole, generally prepared to share some information, or quite reticent? Does it vary?
To be honest, a complete split. Some of the councils that I've spoken to, and having not been here for very long, I've not had time to build up sort of strong relationships, but sort of 50-50 as to those
We'll
who
ask
come
the
back
same question in
quickly.
about six months' time. Because I can see how it could be in their interest to be quite open on a reciprocal basis.
Definitely.
It's a problem for everyone.
Yeah.
Good. Thank you both very much indeed.
Thank you.
Right. Go on to item 12. Community Infrastructure Levy, Governance Arrangements. Graham Clark.
Thank you, Chairman. So, slight change in direction, Chairman, away from sort of performance and things and on to the allocation of funding. So, Community Infrastructure Levy, or SIL, the Council in April agreed Waverley's approach and its schedule of charges, and that is currently gone to examination. And there will be an examination by the planning inspector in the middle of July. So in parallel to that, because that isn't a piece of work that sits with this committee, the reason this is on your agenda is because we need to work up the governance arrangements for allocating the SIL money generated from development to infrastructure schemes. And so a really important process. And when the local plan Part 1 went through council, lots of members spoke about SIL and the importance of infrastructure. And so when SIL starts to be applied, which provided the inspector is happy with it through the examination, and then provided that our council approve it finally in October, a few months after that, so let's say end of December, straight into January, that's when SIL will start coming in. We have to be ready with a process for allocating SIL to projects across a range of different infrastructure providers, including Surrey County, ourselves, town and parish councils, etc. So what I'm proposing here, Chairman, is that we do this in 2 stages. Because we've got time to do that, I'm suggesting that we establish some principles around the sort of forum for allocating these bids, or considering and allocating, and then we go away after your comments this evening and officers work up some more detailed criteria, and we'll come back to your September meeting to go into a bit more detail around it. So just a couple of points by way of introduction, Chairman, then we can throw it open. I'm saying in the 3rd paragraph here about focusing on paras 29 and 30, which I'll get to in a minute. SIL is not something that's we're completely free to spend on anything. We can't use it to support our normal revenue budgets or services, but we can use it to provide infrastructure. And there's a lot more flexibility with SIL than there was with its predecessor, which was PIC, which is the Planning Infrastructure Contribution, which again is pooled arrangement for infrastructure funds from developers. Just one quick correction, paragraph 4 says that the balance of the old PIC money is, well, that's £10 million, which it isn't, it's £100,000. I think the K has slipped in place of a naught. So, Chairman, a number of councils who have PIC in this area do various things, and that's set out in para 24. Some of our officers from planning and from democratic services went down to meet with Havant and East Hants because we had obviously a connection with those councils. They both have SIL in place. Got some really good feedback. We've spoken to Elmbridge and a few of the others. And really what's come from that is, what really matters here is what works for our council, and it needs to be appropriate. We're fully town and parish, so not all councils are, so it needs to take account of that. But it has to be what members feel here that is right for us. So they do a variety of things. I'm not suggesting we follow any one particular council. And what we're proposing is various principles there in paragraph 25, which hopefully members will support, around sort of being transparent, around liaison with other bodies, etc. And then we're getting into some headline sort of criteria in paragraph 29, which we can develop over the course of the summer with some more detailed criteria. And then we get on to paragraph 30, which sets out what we're proposing. So the way that SIL will work is there'll be a slow start. Probably this time next year we'll start to get some money in, and then over the next sort of 10-15 years, we'll be running into millions of pounds that will be coming in from SIL. So clearly you'll have your big guns pitching in. So you'll have education and Surrey generally. Plus you'll have us on the sort of leisure front, etc. Potentially some health coming in as well. So what we're proposing here is a quarterly bidding round and a governance board that is made up of Waverley officers and members and a panel, and they will make recommendations through to the executive, etc. So that's really where the focus, I think, Chairman, of the sort of discussion should be now. If members are sort of broadly happy with this, then we'll take that forward and work up some detailed criteria and come back in September. But clearly, if members have strong views around any particular points, we can take that on board as well and give that due consideration.
Thank you very much. I think I understand that basically you've given us in paragraph 24 examples of what other comparable councils have chosen to do. As you say, we're not obliged to follow them, but it gives you a good sense of what the practical possibilities are. The principles are in paragraph 25. A key element of decision making will be how you categorise various bids or parts of bids. And really the meat of this is in 30, where you're proposing a particular governance model and asking for our comments on it.
That's correct, Chairman.
The one thing I wasn't completely clear about is the relationship between the panel and the governance board. In the fourth bullet point, what have I missed? Or is it the same thing? It says all bids are considered by CIO governance board, the named people, and panel makes recommendations on prioritisation of the project.
Yes, apologies. That should say the board.
Oh, it is the board. Good.
Yes, that should say the word panel. If I can replace that with this board.
That's fine.
Yeah. Thank you.
David.
Thanks, Chairman. I apologise if my question reveals that I haven't read enough. Could well do. The process outlined in paragraph 30, is this for the money over and above that the parish council will be expecting to receive, provided they have a neighbourhood plan?
So what will happen with SIL is, regardless of neighbourhood plans, parish and town councils will receive 15% of the SIL received in their areas.
Yep.
And if you've got a neighbourhood plan fully adopted, there's a top-up of another 10%. So they will receive 25%.
Very good ploy.
So this is dealing with the balance that will come to Waverley.
That's what I wanted.
Yeah.
Thank you. But does this mean that a parish council can, they can submit a bid?
Absolutely.
So we've already had 25%, but if they've got a very good thing to spend it on, they could bid for some more.
No. So let's be clear here.
I wondered.
The towns and parishes are one of a list of potential bidders, which, as Surrey County Council with its transport or highways hat, or with its education hat, the point is that with the money, which they can't spend on anything that they want, they must spend it on infrastructure projects, as in the section 123 list. But they will then be at that table. They will have their pot of money, and they can propose to the panel, to the board, sorry, what they think it should be spent on. It will be very specific to their area, and it will give them the chance to say what they think their priorities for the area are. You take Hazelmere, they might have very clear ideas of what this SIL money should be spent on, perhaps before other things. Now, they will be in a position to say, we have this much money, we can talk about, please put it to these projects, and the board will then take that on board, and depending on its view of whether these are critical, essential, or desirable, agree or propose other things. Is this more or less correct?
Yes, so not about the town or parish slice, because that goes straight to them and it's up to them how they spend that. But certainly if the balance, the towns and parishes can pitch in to express their view on local priorities within their areas to this panel. Board, sorry.
So it is what I was hoping. There might be a bit more money available on top of the 25%.
Well, so the 25% just goes straight to the towns and parishes, or 15%.
And they have to spend that on 1, 2, 3 issues.
They do, but they don't have to have regard to Waverley's determining of projects.
They can decide it themselves.
I was not clear about that.
So that's gone. So the balance comes to Waverley to determine how that's spent. But that's not to say that the towns and parishes can't feed into that process. And in fact, our new SIL officer will be actively trying to engage with the towns and parishes to get their ideas about the local. Now, it doesn't preclude them from getting more money to sort of top up if there's a credible bid that comes forward and they need match funding to bolster their 15 or 25% from the overall pot, and it ticks all the boxes and the board is satisfied that it's the right way of spending some money in that area. That's absolutely fine too.
Thank you.
So this is, and the SIL money is what comes, we saw the formula where so much per square metre or whatever, given the type of development.
Yeah.
Is it expected there could also be separate agreements signed with for say a very large estate? We'd like this road completely redone, it's going to cost 50,000. Is that in addition? Could that be in addition to SIL and outside of this?
So they will still happen. So you'll still get bespoke, and Elizabeth will correct me if I get this wrong. You'll still get bespoke Section 106s for larger schemes.
It's still Section 106
and Section 278s on the highways, etc. You can't double tax a development, so it will be one or the other. So you can't expect a for a development to provide a bespoke Section 106 for various things and also pay SIL. It'll be one or the other, but it's whatever's appropriate, and there'll be that will be determined at the time. But so SIL is really, as I say, replacing PIC. It's a way of pooling funds. Some might be 1 or 2, 3 houses, some might be 40 or 50 houses, but then you might get an application of 300 houses where a bespoke Section 106, because there's very local needs, is more appropriate, and that's what we'll
And that's decided at the planning application time, negotiation time.
Well, probably pre-application stage
Yeah.
will be pretty clear, I think, as the scheme develops, what the most appropriate mechanism to achieve the optimum level of infrastructure will be.
Some of us never understood PIC really.
So,
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Chairman. Two questions, one around administration for either Graham or Peter, and then one for colleagues around the governance. The administration one is based on the fact that the local committee last year got a presentation from the SIL officer in Surrey County Council about the implementation across Surrey. And the point he made very strongly is that the funds ain't going to come rolling in during the first couple of years. All the developers have madly been scrabbling to get 106 agreements in place for their current portfolio, and it's probably all going to go very quiet while we do things in a cheaper way than will happen when 106 comes out. So we can spend up to 5% of the available funds for the administration. Are we going to cover that over the first 2 years? And if not, have we got funds budgeted to make sure that we have someone learning the ropes?
Yeah, so we'll need to sort of bridge fund this because the funding will be backloaded. I mean, I'm hoping not much beyond a year, but we've listened to what other councils have said, and there is very much depends on the economy and the market, how quickly the starts on site happen under the SIL regime. So we've appointed somebody because they need to come in and set this up. So we've got our officer in place, and we're buying a system. So we will be sort of bridge funding that from our resources, and then when the money comes in, it will replenish that fund. So we don't need to budget for it as such, but we'll dip into a reserve and then top the reserve back up. When the SIL comes in, we'll top slice our 5%, that'll be a first call. So it might take 2 or 3 years to recover the money, but I would hope we've got enough coming in a year's time to start paying at least the salary of the SIL officer.
Okay, so the challenge is recognised. On the governance front, it's really a question more for colleagues. When it comes to actually approving large chunks of money, there's always a question of whether those doing the approval will behave federally or territorially, and we frequently see territorial behaviours. So looking at the current composition of the executive who are going to make the final decision, we've got 2/3 of it come from south and central, and the places with the most likely infrastructure demands are going to be east and west. And I just wonder whether anyone else shares my concerns as to whether that might be a potential issue, or do we trust our executive? After all, the executive is not a stable entity; it will vary over time.
But yeah, I think that's a very fair point, and I think we should radio back to the executive that having a representative from each of the 4 planning areas on this board to make sure that all interests are covered and people can actually speak up might be a very useful piece of democratic pressure valve work.
It's a very good point, and your proposed solution is an obvious one, but don't assume that because you have some local resident councillors on the executive, they necessarily act for anywhere else but Waverley as a whole, which is good.
Yes, but optics are important.
It doesn't mean anything. The other committees I read.
The difficulty will.
None of them are here.
The difficulty will be if decisions made perfectly properly and for very good reasons just coincidentally happen to favour the parts of the borough which are represented by the people on that board. We have a particular problem in that we have this curious arrangement of 4 distinct conurbations, one of which is larger than the other 3, and a rural area which is pointed out about economic strategy can easily become a little overlooked.
Well,
and just dealing with this is going to be an important piece of, popular management to make sure no one thinks anything unfair is happening. I'm quite sure that it won't. But
yes, and I've often quoted to residents who ask awkward questions that it's actually very democratic. The way it happens at the moment is that, for example, the Southern Area Planning Committee, most of the members are either on Haysmere Council or live in Haysmere. So we think that's nice. You get relative insulation. Each settlement area gets councils on the area predominantly representing them. I wonder, is there not any tying up of the SIL money received to a geographical area? Wouldn't that solve it? And it's come from developers.
Chairman, so I was going to cover that actually. So all I'd say is it's up to you, and what you currently do, the Waverley's current approved method of allocating the old PIP funds was to do just that. It was to divide the borough into the 4 planning areas and pick, received from development in that area is spent in that area. And that is something that when we get into the detailed criteria, members, which this committee will be sort of working up and proposing to the executive, is something that you may wish to continue, because so that means clearly, you know, infrastructure at one end of the borough, infrastructure money raised, you know, wouldn't necessarily be spent right over the other, but it would be contained broadly in that sort of quarter of the borough. So you could continue to do that. I think with regards, take the points entirely about where the current executive members, you know, wards are. I mean, obviously that changes over time, but I think that the key thing is that in terms of transparency, this committee will be working up some criteria, and provided bids are applied, are considered sort of objectively against that criteria, then hopefully that will help to you know, ensure a transparent, objective process. But I mean, one of the reasons why we're doing this in 2 hits is to give the members of this committee the chance to sort of feed in so that we get this right. Because what we don't want to do, and again this is feedback from other councils, is you know, don't go in with either flimsy governance arrangements or the wrong governance arrangements, because you'll regret it in a year's time and you have to unpick it and you're getting a mess. So I think, yeah, I wanted to bring this to you twice so that we can really try and get this right.
Good. Right, David again, then Nick.
Very briefly, I think that's an excellent idea to continue as we pick 2 areas. I find it very difficult, I mean, unless there is some major infrastructure thing that would encompass the borough as a whole, I find it difficult to think of one of those.
Right, okay. Nick?
Thank you. I'm just asking a question about the bespoke arrangement with Dunsfold, where I understand that there's something like £20 million, which is on a 106 agreement rather than a SIL. And according to Richard Cooper from Surrey and Mike Green, that a lot of that money is going to be spent on projects outside the borough, including this tunnel that we're proposing to go underneath Guildford. So I'm just wondering, are those 106 agreements set in stone, or can we alter them at some future stage so that they can be used for projects within the borough, such as new railway lines?
Could I suggest we take this offline? It's a very specific issue, and it's not to do with this paper, and I'm quite keen to stick very firmly to the agenda. It's a long discussion on its own. So here we're just simply giving our views on what we've seen, which is the first proposal from the officers. And I think, taking the point Councillor Round has mentioned, I think is that the only substantive comment we want to make? We think that the geographical allocation of PIC money to the relevant planning area should continue for CIL. Is that the feeling of the meeting?
I certainly prefer that to the executive.
No, fine, all right. Well, that's a way that it actually prevents the executive doing anything we don't think is fair. Well,
presumably this will affect the expectations of the planners when they put when they accept the plan for the local area. The local people will expect the greater input in that area.
Yeah, this is why fairness, I think, is so important in the issue.
Yeah.
Right. So is that agreed?
Agreed.
Thank you very, very much indeed. Right, we can move on to item 13, budget shortfall commitments. Peter Vickers.
Thank you, Chairman. So to do some background for this first, so everyone can get the same understanding. The medium-term financial plan, the current medium-term financial plan, was refreshed in July last year, and in September last year, the Overlay Scrutiny Board agreed to support the budget gap, the resolution of the budget gap shown in the current plan. So in terms of that support, in January, a report came forward with some work streams that this committee and so the other scrutiny committees could sign up to develop out those plans that support resolving the longer term budget gap that we're facing. There were 2 work streams, there were 2 key elements to the plan. One of them was actually a subgroup of all 4 scrutiny committees. But as members, you'll predominantly lead on in terms of 5 particular work streams that we developed out to address some potential issues. And then the second aspect was that this committee itself, the Value for Money Committee, has signed up to having an overview of where the officers are in terms of working up the solutions to the longer term problem that we're facing. So this paper literally just walks you through. So it's the first report really of where the officers are at this point in time. So it just walks you through all the key initiatives that are actually underway at this point and where the thinking is to address the quite a considerable issue that we've got in terms of budget gap. So just walk you through the report. The background describes the key areas where we're looking to make a substantial difference to the budget going forward. So it's there to be seen. It's about achieving the cost savings through better procurement, investing in property, looking at fees and charges, where are we raising the right amount, are we cost recovering effectively for current services. So it's working with the government to try and reverse the decision to give us a negative grant, so 800,000 this coming year. It's also influencing the business rate retention rebasing in 2021. So those are the key areas, looking for efficiencies. So in terms of the report, where we're at the moment, section 2, heads of service proposals, I've just literally gone through the key areas that are actually underway at the moment, so without too much detail to it. We've covered quite a bit of it actually in the heads of service plans that we've talked about tonight. So in terms of the efficiency reviews, I've described what's going on in benefits. It's currently underway in the revenue service, which is one of my own direct services. And over time, the next step will be to roll out those efficiency reviews in the targeted areas across the council, where they will make a substantive difference to our customer service offer, which works in the daily channel shift, but also makes a lot of difference to our bottom line, as in it has significant impact. The second bit is streamlining financial admin. It's an area that's ready to have a proper look at. The key elements of that are redesigning our processes so that our frontline staff aren't engaged in any more financial admin than absolutely necessary. At the moment we have some quite clunky processes and systems that do take up a fair amount of time. They're not that effective for our technicians and specialists in the front line dealing with stuff that really should just be happening quite easily for them. So this is talking about fees and charges again, about making it happen smoothly using the latest technologies. There's a project underway in the finance team at the moment looking at this. We will be working, as we are at the moment, with David through channel shift, looking at the debt situation, making sure it's absolutely slick and joined up across the authority, so we're not trying to deal with debt in bespoke silo effects across different services. We're looking at procurement. We spend £14 million a year on general fund. We spend potentially up to £27 million a year on housing. There's a lot of procurement that goes on in this authority. A huge amount of that procurement is actually quite small scale purchasing. It's not necessarily the big OG type things like the waste contract and the housing maintenance. We do a lot of procurement that takes up people's time. Even small procurements take up people's time in the authority. Buying one of the little things to run the business. And that's frontline service time being taken up through the devolved process, where we expect our frontline service officers to be skilled in a lot of these areas like procurement, which isn't really their main reason to be there. They're there to deliver specialised services that they deliver. So we're taking another look at how we do procurement, and we're trying to drop back into a smaller professional group that can take the pressure off front line and enable the frontline capacity to evolve through the process we're going through in terms of looking at how we deliver services. So going on to David's channel shift. So David told you about we've got 12 call groups across the authority. It doesn't make a lot of sense when you step back and look at the bigger picture. There are economies of scale to be had. So a big way of stepping forward with that is to rationalise our IT systems, getting them to speak to each other a lot more, bringing a CRM system, which is customer relationship management. So more people in the authority, especially our call centre areas, our customer focused areas, have a lot more information about any of our customers, regardless of whether they're interacting within the authority. It also means that we can do a lot more self-service through a CRM system. So if you want to know your council tax balance, just go look for yourself. You don't need to ring somebody here to ask a question or email us. If you are minded to do that, you can help yourself on these things. It takes the pressure off services. So sitting alongside that, we're obviously going to have to do, this is what I was talking about, targeting our systems thinking reviews to make sure that our processes are absolutely focused on delivering what's needed for the customer and just removing what we call the waste out of the system, so that we're effective, we're slick in what we're doing. That will enable a much smaller call centre group to be in the same team, and we're not throwing money at servicing waste where people are phoning up chasing something that we should have just got right in the first place. It just doesn't make sense to any business to do that, and we're trying to get to that point. It's a bit of an evolving process and some culture change required in that. So David's got a project document that's actually being finalised now around channel shift. Lots of different strands to it, and it's underway at the moment, isn't it, David? Yeah. So lots more information to be had on that one. A really big project underway. David's mentioned it. This building, this big facility we're using here, valuable asset, costs a small fortune to run. Ties in with the HR strategy that's coming through, ties into the workforce stats we're seeing around pay and reward and turnover, looking again at how we are rewarding people, looking at the use of this building in terms of, do we need people in this building to deliver our services? Are we using the right technologies that are available today to deliver service? There's all of these things being brought into the mix as part of this project to look at how we can reduce our overall management costs of delivering our services. Another big area that we've been getting into is local authority trading companies, and this is where Councillor Waverley, the chairman, is saying about cost reduction. If we can't generate income, we've got to look at cost reduction or service reduction effectively. There is another aspect to this. We don't necessarily have to cut the cost of the service as such, or cut the volume of service. We can look at different ways of delivering the service so that we can mitigate our own cost and risk and use different vehicles to get leverage from other organisations that have a big interest, especially government organisations, the county, NHS for instance, the third-party voluntary sector, charity sector, that have as much interest as we do in a lot of the services, especially the wellbeing and the elderly services that we run, so that we can start to deliver differently and other people can put money into it and be a lot more effective. So it's looking at different statuses of what we can do with some of the services that we have without actually reducing those services. Just don't need to say much more about that at the moment. It's successful as it stands. It's challenging but successful. We're looking at status quo around the business rate retention, the negative government grant as mentioned, fair funding review, these are really big items coming up in the next 2 years on certainly our financial agenda, and we do have to influence government on their thinking. We know under fair funding that the services we run are not the priority services they're looking at from the fair funding review. It's the elderly, or the care sector, county, and then children and families, roads, transportation. It's unfair to some extent because the impact that the services we have are huge for local people around the day centres and the other aspects that we run. So we have to be lobbying in those areas. Medium-term financial plan itself, I'll be working with the management group right up until December in terms of an exercise to identify what this organisation needs to reduce our cost base by 20, 25, 30% over the next 4 years. So it's about just what are the aspects of, is it IT, what are the investments we need, what's it going to physically take just to get to that position, because those numbers are realistic as things stand in terms of what the financing of this society is going to look like in another 4 years' time. So we need to start really building what that picture looks like and what's it going to take for us to get to that end result. So there's a lot in the mix at the moment that's going on. Just a very short summary of that. Would you like to add to that?
Let's add that the Budget Strategy Working Group is up and running. A little smaller than the original plan, but that may not be a bad thing. We are planning over the course of July to meet all 7 heads of service and to begin the process of asking them to give us their ideas as to what they can do in terms of increased income, decreased costs. A great many ideas we put forward in this paper, but the important work is now to actually analyse what they can deliver. An idea may be very attractive, easy to implement, but yield you very little in terms of extra income or cost saving. That's not to say it shouldn't be done. It means you've got to keep on looking for all the other ones. So I see the working group's function to making sure that everything is looked at, understood, and the quantum of its effect on the council's overall financial position is understood. And the very important part, which is work stream 2. Work stream 1 will give us a guide to what the heads of service think can be done. Work stream 2 is a repeat of an exercise conducted 10 years ago where specialist consultants carry out face-to-face interviews. I think last time it was 260 members of the public chosen from deliberately different demographics. It's half men, half women. They're stratified across the borough, all walks of life, all income levels. And the idea is to give the council a clear idea of what the residents think are the most important services. And the important lesson from 10 years ago is that what the heads of service thought and what the public thought were not necessarily the same thing. And 10 years ago is sufficiently long for it to be worth doing this exercise again. It is a crucial part of this process. And work stream 3 will give us a chance to unite the work stream 1 and 2 thoughts and see what actually can be done. And the point to emphasise is that throughout all this we are dealing with forecasts for the next 4 or 5 years which have very large uncertainties in them. To one extent, any one-off relief or mercy from the government doesn't change things very much. If we don't get hit with an 800k negative grant, well, that's nice, but it simply means that one lot of 800k remains in our reserves rather than being lost. It doesn't affect the ongoing position. We're fundamentally concerned about the revenue position of the council, because we must run not only on a balanced budget, but there should be sufficient surplus to maintain the capital of the business. You can't just run down all your assets. You've got to continually renew them and keep them working. And that takes on between 1 and 1.5 million a year. So any surplus that you see arising in the accounts, remember that some of it's due to things which are just distinctly one-off, such as new homes bonus, which we know will not continue forever. We're not treating that as part of our revenue at all. And secondly, we do have to put aside at least 1 to 1.5 million a year to make sure that everything that we use to run the business actually continues to function, and IT is the most obvious example, but by no means the only one. We have buildings as well, which need maintenance, and that has to be paid for. So I urge you to, when you've got time, to read the two documents. They're two documents produced for the benefit of the working group, but all members of this committee are obviously fully free to read them. Any comments you have would be very, very welcome. The four members are myself, Nabil Nasir, Mike Band and Dennis Lee, and we will be undoubtedly reporting back to you over the course of the year. That's just an update. So David and then Nick.
Very briefly, can I commend the TECO? Where
So if you want to talk about that, we must go into exempt session.
That's specifically.
Yeah, okay.
But I applaud the idea of doing some thinking out of the box. And I don't know if this is based in part or at all on the... Do you remember we had some strategic discussions on tables of 4 people in the Alfred Noise Centre, I think,
Yes.
and I had to be on the same table as the esteemed Mr. Horwood. But feeling like a maverick, I pushed out the idea, well, for any strategic consideration, we should first ask the question, should we exist? And it was quite interesting. He liked it, he endorsed it. I don't know what happened to it. But by that I mean, it's very encouraging to see what you can do by a third party, independent company that you part own with other councils, that is big enough to have a good career pattern for, I'll just take this out at random, for surveyors, say. So in the past we've been unemployed enough to give them a decent career pattern.
Yeah.
If you had 50, you would. In other words, the benefits of scale. And it should reduce costs and increase service. That's what we're doing, that's great.
It is. And I think we're going to have to think quite about it. Richard.
So, going from existential thinking to petty cash, on the procurement front, is the intent to make this new procurement function sort of absolute, or will a small amount of direct purchasing of minor things like rulers and pencils, etc., remain with the services? Just in my experience, if you give it all to a central function, then it takes an awful long time to get done.
It's not an absolute. We never resort an absolute.
No.
But it's about the key aspects of what goes on, and having that common understanding across the organisation, and also standardisation of practice of where we're at. There's lots of different abilities across the services.
The vast majority of it, I think, is an excellent move and yield enormous value.
We can tend to note the work we've done on Nick. Do you want to come back?
Thank you, Chairman. It's a point I raised before, trying to maximise the income from our own resources. And that is, as been pointed out earlier on in the evening, around 10,000 little small businesses operating from home in this borough. And a lot of them would like to use these facilities as a PowerPoint presentation to promote their business. If we could somehow contact those people and tell them that they could hire this room to present, I mean, that would be quite a good source of income. And I think we should try and do that.
Well, thank you. I think it's something for Robin to grant a possible, David, wish list of possible income forms. Thank you. Well, we can tend to note the report. Thank you very much indeed. We now move on to the committee work programme. 14, pages 153. Yasmin, you're going to introduce this.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. This is the normal standing item that is on all committees, all ONS committees, about work programme going forward. So you see on page 155, 154 has the agenda for today's meeting. That's what we're talking about, sort of June time, and then beyond that is items that could be brought to the committee in the future. So we've already got some dates next to some of them. Performance reports, for example. The capital strategy was something that was brought up, Peter, if you remember, when we talked about the property investment strategy and the treasury management framework in previous owners committees, so that was suggested for September. I know we've talked a little bit about the customer services review, so that could be something, depending on David's findings, that could come to the committee. So this sort of slot in the agenda is an opportunity for members of the committee to put forward any of their suggested items. It also updates, you can see in section B on page 157, they provide updates of the working groups, very brief obviously, and section C, so 158 onwards, is just the tracker of the recommendations made by this committee to let you know where they've got to, basically. So really I'm very happy to take any suggestions for the future work programme of this committee.
Thank you. Any suggestions from colleagues?
Chairman, following on from the first item we considered, we did ask for the economic strategy to come back, so I think that needs to feature in here.
I'm not entirely sure of the timing
yes.
of that. We may be under some pressure to do it before the next meeting. I think certainly it wouldn't be a bad idea to have an item on that in the next meeting anyway.
Thank you.
So that's September.
Yes. I would say it looks a reasonably full agenda anyway, not these things to repeat. And my own view is that I should try and concentrate on a small number and do them well than keep on many items. And I think currently the agenda covers all the important things. And I can't think of any obvious gaps. But well, are we content with that addition of reference to the economic strategy in September to leave things as they are?
Agreed.
Thank you very much indeed. We now have a formal recommendation to exclude the press and public. I will not take you through the entire recommendation. It is there to be read. It is the standard one. Is it your wish that we approve that recommendation to exclude the press and public?
Agreed.
Thank you very much indeed.